The Resolute drifted into the uncharted region of Sector V742, its sensors buzzing with faint traces of activity. Captain Alina Dre stood at the observation deck, her sharp eyes fixed on the holographic projection before her. A derelict alien vessel loomed in the void, its jagged hull reflecting the faint glow of a dying star. It was enormous, nearly 3 times the size of the Resolute, yet utterly lifeless. The Resolute's AI, Vesper, whispered through the comms. Unidentified vessel detected. Class unknown. Minimal power signatures. Structural integrity compromised. Potential hazards present. Alina's gut churned. Humanity had reached beyond its solar system in search of answers, but the universe often offered questions far darker than anticipated. She issued a curt order to deploy a boarding team. The crew braced for what they might find. Minutes later, Alina led her team aboard. The ship's airlock groaned under its age, finally opening into an alien interior that was cold, metallic, and eerily organic. The walls pulsed faintly, veins of dim bioluminescent light snaking across surfaces that seemed more alive than manufactured. Their boots clanged softly against the metal floor as they ventured deeper. The air tasted stale, carrying an acrid tang of decay. Bodies lay strewn across the corridors, humanoid figures with elongated limbs and shimmering, glassy skin, their forms frozen in grotesque expressions of terror. Something had torn through them, leaving scorch marks and jagged wounds. Dr. Lyle Croft, the team's cynobiologist, knelt beside one of the corpses. His scanner emitted a quiet hum, followed by a rapid series of beeps. "These creatures were alive no more than a week ago," he said, voice laced with unease. "Whatever did this was fast and efficient." Alina nodded, her grip tightening on her plasma rifle. The further they delved, the more the ship revealed its secrets. They discovered shattered consoles, walls gouged by claw-like appendages, and unsettling organic growths sprouting from the floor, spangly tendrils curling toward them as if reaching for warmth. In the ship's command chamber, they found the logs. Vesper translated the alien script into fragments of haunting clarity. "We are the last. The Clive have found us. Their hunger is unending. To those who find this, beware. They are coming for you next." Alina replayed the final transmission, her heart sinking. Static crackled through the recording, interspersed with guttural alien shrieks and the bone-chilling sound of something tearing metal apart. A sudden shudder rocked the derelict vessel. Vesper's urgent voice echoed through their comms. "Hostile presence detected. Incoming biosignature. Recommendation: immediate evacuation." Alina barked orders, her team scrambling back toward the airlock. The once silent corridors now reverberated with inhuman screeches. Shadows moved within the pulsing light, darting faster than the human eye could follow. One of the crew screamed as a blur of serrated limbs struck, dragging them into the darkness. "Get back to the ship," Alina ordered, voice ironclad. She covered their retreat, firing into the darkness as the Resolute's airlock loomed ahead. The survivors barely made it aboard. As the Resolute disengaged, the alien vessel erupted in a burst of light and debris, leaving no trace but fear. Alina stood on the bridge, jaw set, as the warning from the logs replayed in her mind. "The Clythe are coming." The Resolute emerged from warp space, the blue-green marble of Earth spinning serenely in the void. Captain Alina Dre stood on the bridge, tension knotting her shoulders. The transmission from the derelict ship played on repeat in her mind. Humanity was no longer alone, and the Clythe were no ordinary threat. Earth's United Council convened in an emergency session as Alina presented the evidence. The alien logs, Vesper's threat analysis, and the harrowing footage of their escape painted a clear picture. An unstoppable hive mind species was devouring its way through the galaxy, and Earth was next. The response was less than unified. Representatives from the colonies bickered over their security vulnerabilities. Corporate leaders, responsible for much of Earth's advanced technology, questioned the expense of mobilizing planetary defenses. National leaders, divided by old rivalries, argued over who would control the resources needed for a military response. Admiral Victor Chen, head of the United Fleet, stood in defense of Elena's plea. If Captain Dre's report is accurate, and I have no reason to doubt it, we have a matter of months before the Clythe reach our borders. This is not just a threat to the colonies, it's a threat to our species. But his words fell on deaf ears. Mistrust and bureaucracy slowed every effort. Humanity had faced internal wars, scarcity, and unrest for centuries. Cooperation was far from instinctual. Meanwhile, reports trickled in from the outer colonies. Ships went silent near the galactic frontier. Distress beacons flared and faded without explanation. Entire mining outposts vanished, leaving nothing but faint charred debris. The Clythe were probing humanity's defenses, and no one could deny it for long. Elena, unable to stomach the Council's inertia, sought allies elsewhere. She contacted former colleagues, engineers, rogue scientists, and captains who had grown disillusioned with Earth's fragmented leadership. In the shadows, they began pooling resources, stealing prototypes, and scavenging old weapon platforms to build a fleet capable of resisting the Clythe. They called their coalition the Iron Resolve Initiative. The first of their warships, the Tempest, was constructed in an abandoned orbital dock. Its frame was crude, patched together with mismatched components, but its railguns and shields outclassed anything in Earth's current arsenal. The Tempest would be humanity's test, a symbol of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. When a Clythe scout bioship breached the outer colonies, the Tempest was deployed, accompanied by a skeleton crew of volunteers and the Resolute. The battle was chaos. The Clythe bioship moved like a predator, its tendrils tearing through ships with unnerving precision. Yet the Tempest's improvised weapons proved effective, piercing its armored carapace and sending it spiraling into the void. The cost was heavy. Half the fleet was destroyed, and the remaining crew saw firsthand the Clythe's terrifying adaptability. But the victory proved one thing: humanity could fight back. As the battered fleet limped home, Elena vowed to push harder. The Clythe were coming, but Earth would meet them not as prey, but as a species forged in iron resolve. The colony of Island 4 floated on the edge of human space, a bustling outpost of miners and traders. Its vast refineries turned asteroids into fuel and wealth, feeding Earth's expansion into the stars. For years, Island 4 had been untouched by war, its people lulled into a fragile sense of security. That security shattered when the Clythe came. The attack began without warning. Clythe bioships breached the colony's defenses in a coordinated strike. Organic tendrils pierced the orbital stations, spilling swarms of insectoid drones that tore through steel and flesh alike. Island 4's security forces fought valiantly, but their weapons were useless against the sheer volume of Clythe attackers. Entire districts were overrun in minutes, the streets filled with screams and chaos. On board the Resolute, Elena Dre received the distress call mid-route to Earth. She listened to the desperate cries of the colony's governor, her fists tightening with every second. The colony wasn't just a target, it was a message. The Clythe were demonstrating their strength, showing humanity what awaited the rest of the galaxy. Reroute to Island 4, she ordered, her voice cold steel. Mobilize all remaining forces. The Resolute and its Galactic fleet of retrofitted ships emerged from warp above the colony. The scene below was apocalyptic. Firestorms raged across Island 4's surface, its atmosphere lit by the eerie green glow of Clythe bioships. The colony's once proud orbital stations now drifted as shattered husks. Brace for combat, Elena commanded as the Clythe ships turned their attention upward. The battle was brutal. The Clythe bioships moved with an organic grace, weaving through the human fleet's firepower with unsettling precision. They adapted quickly, shrugging off each new assault with a counterattack that pushed the Resolute to its limits. Elena's crew fought with grim determination, every volley of their railguns and plasma cannons a desperate attempt to hold the line. As losses mounted, her fleet employed unconventional tactics. They mined the Clythe's flight paths with explosive debris from destroyed ships, forcing them into choke points. Even so, the Clythe overwhelmed the fleet with sheer numbers. On the ground, survivors from the colony held out in fortified bunkers. Civilians huddled together, hearing the shrieks of Clythe drones closing in. Just as their last defenses began to falter, orbital strikes from the Resolute burned through the sky, vaporizing the attackers. Realizing the colony was lost, Alina ordered an evacuation. The Resolute and its remaining ships descended through Island 4's fiery atmosphere, rescuing as many survivors as possible. Crews worked tirelessly, dodging Clythe attacks while cramming civilians onto escape shuttles. As the fleet pulled away, Island 4 detonated behind them. Alina had ordered the colony's fusion core overloaded, creating an explosion that consumed the Clythe bioships still on the surface. In the aftermath, the Resolute's bridge was silent. Hundreds of thousands were dead, but the few thousand survivors who watched Island 4 burn had Alina's undying promise. Humanity would never face such devastation again. The cost of survival weighed heavy, but it also steeled the resolve of every soul on board. Alina knew the Clythe wouldn't stop, but neither would she. The Resolute limped back to a hidden repair dock in orbit around Titan. Its hull bore scars from the battle at Island 4, a stark reminder of how close they had come to total annihilation. Inside, the mood was equally grim. Survivors from the colony filled every spare corner of the ship, and the crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage. In the science lab, Dr. Lyle Croft studied fragments of Clythe biotech salvaged from the battle. The samples pulsed faintly, emitting faint clicks and hums as though alive. Dr. Croft's scanners revealed the unsettling truth. The Clythe's bioships weren't just machines, they were living organisms, genetically engineered to serve the hive mind's will. They adapt to everything we throw at them, Croft explained to Captain Alina Dre. Armor, weapons, tactics, everything we do feeds their evolution. The findings deepened the crew's unease, but it was only the beginning of their nightmare. Days later, engineer Marissa Cole collapsed in the engine bay. She was feverish, her veins darkened with an unnatural hue. At first, the medics assumed it was exhaustion or radiation poisoning from the battle, but scans revealed something far worse. A tiny Clythe parasite, undetected during the evacuation, had embedded itself in her bloodstream. Containment protocols went into immediate effect. The engine bay was sealed, and Marissa was isolated in quarantine. The parasite worked quickly, spreading through her body, altering her cells. She screamed in agony as her muscles twisted and hardened, her fingers elongating into claw-like appendages. The crew was horrified. Dr. Croft rushed to develop a treatment, but the transformation was rapid, relentless. Marissa's condition deteriorated, her voice replaced by guttural clicks and alien hisses. "She's becoming one of them," whispered Lieutenant Farah Singh, her voice trembling. The situation escalated when Marissa, now more Clythe than human, broke free from her restraints. Her strength was inhuman, her movements unnervingly precise. She tore through the quarantine chamber, forcing the crew into a desperate hunt to subdue her without killing her. On the bridge, Alina grappled with an impossible decision. Containment or termination? Vesper suggested, cold and logical. Allowing the transformation to progress risks compromise of this vessel. Alina refused to give up. She ordered a team to corner Marissa in the engine bay, buying Dr. Croft time to test an experimental serum derived from the Clythe biotech. As the mutated Marissa lunged at her former crewmates, the team managed to sedate her with tranquilizers. Dr. Croft injected the serum, watching in tense silence as it coursed through her veins. Marissa convulsed violently, her alien features receding slowly. After hours of agony, she stabilized, reverting to her human form. The crew breathed a collective sigh of relief, but the ordeal left a scar on their morale. The Clayth's ability to infect and assimilate was a threat unlike any they had faced before. Alina stood on the bridge, staring into the stars. This was more than a war. It was survival against an enemy that sought to erase humanity's very existence. To fight the Clayth, she realized they would have to adapt just as ruthlessly as their enemy. Humanity's individuality might be its greatest weakness, or its most powerful weapon. The Resolute prowled through the black void of uncharted space, its hull repaired, but its crew still bearing the scars of their battle at Axe Island 4. The Clayth's relentless advance left no time for rest. Reports of other colonies falling dark weighed on everyone, but Captain Alina Dre pushed forward with a singular purpose. Somewhere out here, among the ruins of another civilization, lay the hope humanity so desperately needed. The ship's scanners picked up a faint signal, a distress beacon so ancient it was barely functional. Following its trail led the Resolute to a dead world orbiting a cold, dying star. The planet was a graveyard, its surface littered with monolithic structures half buried in sand and ash. Alina dispatched a landing team to investigate, determined to uncover who had sent the signal. The surface was bleak and desolate. Massive spires jutted from the ground like skeletal remains, their once glorious architecture eroded by time. The beacon led them to an underground chamber deep within one of the spires. There, amidst crumbled walls etched with alien glyphs, the team found what seemed to be a lone survivor. The being was ancient, its body a strange amalgam of flesh and machine. Its skin was marked with intricate scars, and its mechanical components hummed faintly, keeping it alive. Its single, glowing eye studied them as though it had been waiting for this moment. Through a universal translator, it introduced itself as Rethak, the last warrior of the Venari, a species annihilated by the Clayth centuries ago. Rethak's voice was heavy with bitterness and sorrow as it recounted the Venari's fall. The Clayth had consumed their worlds one by one, adapting to every strategy the Venari deployed. Rethak's people had fought until nothing remained but ruins and memories. It had sent the beacon as a warning to anyone who would listen, though it had given up hope that another species might rise to succeed where the Venari had failed. Alina refused to accept defeat. Humanity isn't like the others, she said, her words resolute. We fight for more than survival. We fight for each other. Rethak seemed skeptical, but the fire in Alina's determination stirred something within the weary warrior. It revealed the location of the Clayth's central high ship, a gargantuan construct deep within enemy territory. This hive ship, Rethak explained, was the source of the Clayth's coordination and strength. Destroying it would cripple their swarm. Rethak also shared ancient data, weaknesses in the hive ship's biological systems, tactics the Venari had failed to exploit, and a weapon concept that could disrupt the hive's neural network. Humanity's adaptability, Rethak conceded, might be the edge they needed. Alina extended a hand to Rethak, asking the warrior to join them. With a hesitant nod, Rethak agreed, pledging to guide humanity in its most desperate hour. As the Resolute departed the dead world, its crew carried more than just hope. They carried the wisdom of the fallen and the promise of retribution. Alina knew the path ahead was perilous, but the beacon had been lit. Humanity would not go quietly into the void. The Resolute and its makeshift fleet approached the coordinates Rethak had provided, the stars thinning into a vast expanse of dark, interstellar nothingness. At its center loomed the Clayth hive ship, a monstrosity that defied comprehension. The vessel was more organic than mechanical, a writhing, living construct the size of a small moon. Its surface pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, tendrils spiraling outwards to siphon energy from a nearby neutron star. Every scan confirmed their worst fears. The hive ship was a fortress brimming with defenses, surrounded by smaller Clythe bioships that moved like schools of fish. Each one was a deadly predator, capable of shredding steel and adapting to every weapon humanity had so far deployed. On the Resolute's bridge, Alina Dre stood with her crew and their newest ally, Rethak. The ancient warrior's holographic projection highlighted weak points within the hive ship's structure, nodes where the Clythe's neural network converged. If those nodes could be disrupted, it might sever the hive mind's control over its swarm. The strategy was daring, bordering on suicidal. The fleet would create a distraction, drawing the swarm away from the hive ship. Meanwhile, the Resolute would lead a small infiltration team directly into the heart of the monstrosity. Their mission, to deploy a neural disruptor device, built using binary technology, into the hive's core. Alina addressed her crew, her voice unwavering. She acknowledged the danger but reminded them why they fought. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival, it was fighting for the right to exist, to carve its place in a universe that seemed intent on extinguishing it. The fleet engaged the Clythe forces, chaos erupting as human ships clashed with bioships in a desperate bid for survival. Makeshift vessels, some barely spaceworthy, delivered punishing blows to the swarm. The Tempest, piloted by a skeleton crew, led the charge, using its superior shields and firepower to carve a path through the enemy. Amidst the chaos, the Resolute broke away, heading straight for the hive ship. The monstrous vessel retaliated, launching tendril-like appendages that lashed out like living weapons. The Resolute dodged and weaved, its shields groaning under the strain as Alina's team prepared for boarding. The airlock hissed open, revealing the hive ship's interior, a labyrinth of pulsating, fleshy corridors that seemed alive, responding to their every move. Rethak led the way, its knowledge of the Clythe architecture proving invaluable as they navigated the grotesque maze. The team encountered resistance almost immediately. Clythedrones emerged from the walls, shrieking and swarming with terrifying speed. Alina's team fought with relentless determination, plasma rifles and railguns tearing through the creatures. Rethak fought alongside them, its centuries-old combat skills and advanced weaponry turning the tide. At the core of the hive ship, they found the neural nexus, a pulsating, glowing mass that thrummed with alien energy. Dr. Croft activated the disruptor, the device emitting a high-pitched whine as it synced with the nexus. The Clythe hive ship seemed to sense the threat. The walls vibrated, and an ear-splitting roar echoed through the corridors. More drones poured in, the hive's last-ditch effort to protect itself. "Hold them off," Alina ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "This is our only chance." As the disruptor began its final sequence, Alina and her team made their stand against the onslaught. Every second felt like an eternity, but they held their ground, driven by sheer will and the unshakable belief that humanity could triumph. The disruptor activated, releasing a pulse that rippled through the hive ship. The Clythe drones froze mid-attack, their connection to the hive mind severed. For the first time, the swarm was silent. But victory came at a cost. The hive ship began to collapse, its organic structure disintegrating under the disruptor's influence. Alina ordered an immediate evacuation, knowing they had only moments to escape the imploding behemoth. As the Resolute blasted away from the dying hive ship, the crew watched in awe and relief. The Clythe's most formidable weapon had been destroyed, and for the first time, humanity had struck a decisive blow. But Alina knew the war wasn't over. This was only the beginning. The destruction of the hive ship sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For the first time in recorded history, the Clythe's advance had been halted, their relentless coordination fractured. Across human space, news of the victory spread like wildfire, igniting hope in those who had already resigned themselves to extinction. On board the Resolute, the mood was both triumphant and uneasy. The neural disruptor had crippled the hive ship, but Rethak was quick to temper their celebration. The Clythe hive mind was vast, and the destruction of one nexus was merely a scratch on its surface. The swarm would adapt, as it always did. In the war room, Elena Dre convened her commanders and advisors. Vesper displayed holographic projections of Clythe activity across the frontier. Small fleets were retreating, disoriented without the hive ship's guidance, but larger forces were regrouping. Rethak explained that the Clythe's remaining hive minds would shift resources, evolving new strategies to counter humanity's disruptor technology. "We've bought time," Elena said, her tone resolute. "Let's make it count." Earth's fractured leadership finally took notice of Elena's success. Messages from the United Council poured in, some congratulating her, others seeking control of her growing fleet. Corporate factions, smelling profit in humanity's fight for survival, offered advanced technology in exchange for future concessions. But Elena had no patience for politics. She addressed the council directly in a transmission broadcast to every corner of human space. Her words were sharp and uncompromising. "This isn't about borders or profits. It's about survival. We can't afford to let our differences divide us anymore. The Clythe won't wait for us to sort ourselves out, and neither will I." Her message resonated. Volunteers from all walks of life, miners, engineers, pilots, soldiers, flocked to join the Iron Resolve initiative. Shipyards churned out warships at unprecedented rates, cobbling together fleets from whatever resources they could find. The coalition was far from perfect, but for the first time, humanity was united in purpose. Rethak played a pivotal role in this transformation. The Vineri warrior trained new leaders, sharing strategies that had once held the Clythe at bay. It pushed humanity to think beyond their traditional tactics, emphasizing adaptability and unpredictability. Even as humanity rallied, the Clythe launched probing attacks. These skirmishes tested the mettle of the new fleets and revealed troubling truths. The Clythe were already adapting to the disruptor technology. Bioships began to appear with reinforced neural nodes, their structures more chaotic and resistant to the device's effects. In one such battle near the colony of Anchorus 5, a fleet led by the Tempest managed to repel the Clythe, but at great cost. The Clythe deployed new tactics, overwhelming human defenses with berserker drones that self-destructed on impact. Elena knew humanity was in a race against time. The Clythe's adaptability was unmatched, and the disruptor was no longer enough to tip the scales. "We need to evolve faster than they can," she told her team. "We need to stop fighting like prey and start thinking like predators." In secret, Dr. Croft and Rethak began developing a new weapon, an artificial intelligence modeled after the hive mind itself. This AI, dubbed Eidolon, would serve as humanity's answer to the Clythe, a neural network capable of anticipating their moves and countering their strategies. But integrating such a powerful AI posed risks of its own. As the final components of Eidolon were installed on the Resolute, Elena stood on the observation deck, gazing into the endless expanse of stars. The tide was turning, but the price of victory was rising. Humanity was changing, and Elena couldn't shake the feeling that by the time this war ended, they might not recognize themselves. The moment humanity had feared and hoped for had arrived. The Clythe, finally regrouped and adapting faster than ever, launched their full-scale counterattack against Earth's remaining colonies. Their bioships, now reinforced against humanity's disruptor weapons, appeared in overwhelming numbers. The Clythe weren't just attacking, they were hunting, their swarm closing in like a relentless wave. In response, the Iron Resolve Initiative, now a united force of humanity's best and brightest, mobilized its fleets for what would be their final confrontation. The Resolute, carrying Eidolon, the AI that mimicked the Clythe's hive mind, moved to the front of the line. The weapon was humanity's last, best hope. If Eidolon could replicate the adaptability of the Clythe, they might finally gain the edge. Captain Elena Dre stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her eyes hard with resolve. They were far from ready, but the Clythe had forced humanity's hand. There would be no retreat. There would be no surrender. This battle would determine the future of every human alive. Eidolon had been integrated into the Resolute's tactical systems, but its true strength lay in its ability to predict and counter the Clythe's strategies in real time. It learned, analyzed, and adapted with incredible speed, adjusting to the enemy's every move. Yet, despite its promise, Alina knew Eidolon was still an experiment, one that could either turn the tide or destroy humanity's last hope for survival. The battle began in the outer rim of the system, near the charred remains of the colony that had once been their pride. The Clythe swarmed in, unleashing waves of bioships that tore through the human defenses like paper. Each strike was met with brutal counterattacks, human ships now fighting with an uncharacteristic ferocity. Eidolon calculated the Clythe's movements in real time, allowing the fleet to predict the next strike before it came. It was working. Eidolon was outmaneuvering the Clythe. The human ships adapted on the fly, countering every assault with precision and surprise. The Clythe were no longer the dominant force. For the first time, they seemed to hesitate, unsure of how to respond. But just as victory seemed within reach, the Clythe revealed their ultimate weapon, a colossal bioship, far larger than anything humanity had ever encountered. It was a living fortress, pulsating with dark energy and protected by an impenetrable shield. Alina watched, her heart sinking as the ship moved toward Earth. They couldn't defeat it with their current weapons, and Eidolon's simulations showed no immediate way to breach its defenses. There was only one option left, a desperate, last-ditch assault. Without hesitation, Alina ordered the Resolute to engage. The fleet rallied behind her, launching a coordinated strike on the massive bioship. As they neared, Alina led a small strike team to board the creature, their goal to reach its central neural nexus. It was a suicide mission, but it was their only chance. The Resolute's crew fought their way through the pulsating walls of the bioship, their weapons barely cutting through its hardened exterior. The Clythrons came at them relentlessly, but humanity's warriors were fueled by a single, unwavering belief. This was their fight, and they would win. Reaching the central nexus, Alina and Rethak, fighting side by side, planted the last remaining neural disruptor deep within the ship's core. The creature writhed, a shriek of agony echoing through the vessel. The disruptor activated, and the Clythe's hive mind splintered. It was over. As the bioship collapsed in on itself, Alina stood on the deck of the Resolute, staring at the stars. The battle had been won, but the cost had been immense. Earth was safe for now, but humanity's future was forever changed. They had fought not just for survival, but for their right to exist as individuals in a universe that wanted to erase them. The Resolute turned back toward Earth, its mission complete. And for the first time in a long while, Alina allowed herself to hope. The Iron Resolve had won. Humanity had proven its courage and its resolve amid the stars. Brace for combat, Alina commanded as the Clythe ships turned their attention upward. The battle was brutal. The Clythe bioships moved with an organic grace, weaving through the human fleet's firepower with unsettling precision. They adapted quickly, shrugging off each new assault with a counterattack that pushed the Resolute to its limits. Alina's crew fought with grim determination, every volley of their railguns and plasma cannons a desperate attempt to hold the line. As losses mounted, her fleet employed unconventional tactics. They mined the Clythe's flight paths with explosive debris from destroyed ships, forcing them into choke points. Even so, the Clythe overwhelmed the fleet with sheer numbers. On the ground, survivors from the colony held out in fortified bunkers. Civilians huddled together, hearing the shrieks of Clythe drones closing in. Just as their last defenses began to falter, orbital strikes from the Resolute burned through the sky, vaporizing the attackers. Realizing the colony was lost, Alina ordered an evacuation. The Resolute and its remaining ships descended through Island 4's fiery atmosphere, rescuing as many survivors as possible. Crews worked tirelessly, dodging Clythe attacks while cramming civilians onto escape shuttles. As the fleet pulled away, Island 4 detonated behind them. Alina had ordered the colony's fusion core overloaded, creating an explosion that consumed the Clythe bioships still on the surface. In the aftermath, the Resolute's bridge was silent. Hundreds of thousands were dead, but the few thousand survivors who watched Island 4 burn had Alina's undying promise. Humanity would never face such devastation again. The cost of survival weighed heavy, but it also steeled the resolve of every soul on board. Alina knew the Clythe wouldn't stop, but neither would she. The Resolute limped back to a hidden repair dock in orbit around Titan. Its hull bore scars from the battle at Island 4, a stark reminder of how close they had come to total annihilation. Inside, the mood was equally grim. Survivors from the colony filled every spare corner of the ship, and the crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage. In the science lab, Dr. Lyle Croft studied fragments of Clythe biotech salvaged from the battle. The samples pulsed faintly, emitting faint clicks and hums as though alive. Dr. Croft's scanners revealed the unsettling truth. The Clythe's bioships weren't just machines. They were living organisms, genetically engineered to serve the hive mind's will. They adapt to everything we throw at them, Croft explained to Captain Alina Dre. Armor, weapons, tactics, everything we do feeds their evolution. The findings deepened the crew's unease, but it was only the beginning of their nightmare. Days later, engineer Marissa Cole collapsed in the engine bay. She was feverish, her veins darkened with an unnatural hue. At first, the medics assumed it was exhaustion or radiation poisoning from the battle, but scans revealed something far worse. A tiny Clythe parasite, undetected during the evacuation, had embedded itself in her bloodstream. Containment protocols went into immediate effect. The engine bay was sealed, and Marissa was isolated in quarantine. The parasite worked quickly, spreading through her body, altering her cells. She screamed in agony as her muscles twisted and hardened, her fingers elongating into claw-like appendages. The crew was horrified. Dr. Croft rushed to develop a treatment, but the transformation was rapid, relentless. Marissa's condition deteriorated, her voice replaced by guttural clicks and alien hisses. "She's becoming one of them," whispered Lieutenant Farah Singh, her voice trembling. The situation escalated when Marissa, now more Clythe than human, broke free from her restraints. Her strength was inhuman, her movements unnervingly precise. She tore through the quarantine chamber, forcing the crew into a desperate hunt to subdue her without killing her. On the bridge, Elena grappled with an impossible decision. Containment or termination? Vesper suggested cold and logical. Allowing the transformation to progress risks compromise of this vessel. Elena refused to give up. She ordered a team to corner Marissa in the engine bay, buying Dr. Croft time to test an experimental serum derived from the Clythe biotech. As the mutated Marissa lunged at her former crewmates, the team managed to sedate her with tranquilizers,